Listen, I'm about to tell you something the government doesn't want you to know. Something so insane, so terrifying, that most people won't even believe it's true. But it is. Every word of it. You know how sometimes soldiers go missing in wars? Everyone thinks they got captured by enemies or maybe wandered off and got lost. But what if I told you that in the mountains of Afghanistan, something else has been taking them? Something that's been hiding in caves for thousands of years? Picture this. You're a soldier. You've got your rifle, your body armor, years of training. You think you're ready for anything. Then one night you're searching some old copper mines in the mountains. It's dark, cold, and everything seems quiet. Too quiet. Your squad leader stops. He's noticed something weird. There are footprints in the dust, but they're way too big. Like each footprint is as long as your rifle, and whatever made them had to be at least 12 feet tall. But that's impossible, right? Wrong. Your buddy whispers that you should get out of there. Now. But before anyone can move, you see eyes in the darkness. Not where a normal person's eyes would be. These are way up high, staring down at you. Then you see the hands reaching out from the cave. Massive, pale as bone. And here's the really messed up part. They have 6 fingers. This is exactly what happened to Specialist Hakimullah Zadran and his squad in March 2004. 6 trained soldiers with machine guns. Gone. Vanished. The army told their families they were missing in action and sealed off the caves. But you want to know what really happened? You want to know what actually lives in those mountains? See, the locals have always known. They call them Dev, the giants. For hundreds of years, shepherds have been warning people not to go near certain caves. They say their grandfathers saw them, and their grandfathers before that. Massive beings that live deep underground and only come out when they're hungry. The army thought these were just silly mountain stories, fairy tales to scare children. They were dead wrong. I've tracked down the survivors. Yeah, there were a few. Soldiers who saw things that haunt them to this day. Men who came back different, who can't sleep without checking their windows, who jump when shadows move. At first, they wouldn't talk. The military made them sign papers promising to keep quiet. Some were threatened, others were paid off. A few just disappeared when they tried to speak up. But after 20 years, some of them are ready to tell the truth. They're tired of the nightmares, tired of the lies, tired of knowing that those things are still out there while the government pretends they don't exist. What they told me will make your skin crawl. It'll make you question everything you thought you knew about our world. And it'll definitely make you think twice about exploring any deep caves. Because here's the thing. The giants aren't gone. They're still there, in mountains across Afghanistan, Pakistan, and who knows where else. Living in cave systems that go deeper than anyone's ever mapped. Waiting, watching. And sometimes when soldiers get too close to their territory, they take them. The government knows. They've built exclusion zones, put up barriers, classified entire mountain ranges as chemically contaminated to keep people away. But walls can't stop curious soldiers from investigating strange noises. Orders can't prevent patrols from following missing shepherds into the darkness. And cover-ups can't change the fact that something ancient and hungry lives in those mountains. I'm going to tell you exactly what Sergeant Nasratullah Toki and his rescue team found when they went looking for the missing patrol. What they discovered in those caves. What spoke to them in a language older than civilization. And why the American Special Forces team that went in after them came out with half their men missing and the rest too traumatized to speak. This isn't some made-up story. This is what really happens when our world collides with something that was here first. Something that never left. Get comfortable. Lock your doors. And whatever you do, try not to think about this the next time you see a dark cave entrance. Because once you know the truth, you can never unknow it. Sergeant Nasratullah Toki couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was 5:30 in the morning at Forward Operating Base Thunder, and everything looked normal. Soldiers eating breakfast, trucks getting loaded, the usual routine. But Toki had survived 20 years in the Afghan army by trusting his gut, and right now his gut was screaming danger. Then Private Wahidullah knocked on his door. The kid was 19, fresh out of training, and his face was white as paper. "Sergeant, the captain wants to see you. Now." In the command center, Captain Maywand was staring at a map with an expression Toki had never seen before. Fear mixed with confusion. "Zadran's patrol missed check-in," the captain said quietly. "Twice?" Toki felt his blood run cold. Missing one check-in happens sometimes. Radio problems, bad weather. But twice? That meant trouble. Where were they? "Here." Maiwan pointed to a spot on the map that made Toki's stomach drop. The Spin Gar Mountains. Specifically the area around the old copper mines that every local knew to avoid. "Captain, those mines..." "I know what the villagers say." Maiwan cut him off. "But we have 6 missing soldiers. Take your best men. Find them." Toki picked his squad carefully. These weren't just any soldiers. These were men who'd faced death and lived to tell about it. Corporal Zamarai, who once fought off 12 Taliban fighters single-handed. Lance Corporal Pacha, the best tracker in the entire province, and 4 others who knew how to handle themselves when things went sideways. They loaded into 2 vehicles as the sun came up. The first few miles were on a real road, but soon they were bouncing along dirt tracks that got narrower with every turn. The mountains loomed larger, and Toki noticed something that made his skin prickle. No birds, no animal sounds, nothing. The village of Dara should have been bustling by now. Instead, it looked abandoned. No kids playing, no women at the well. Even the dogs were hiding. Toki knocked on the headman's door. After a long wait, old Haji Wali Ahmad cracked it open. His eyes darted around like he expected something to grab him. "Toki, thank God you're here. Where is everyone?" "Inside, hiding." The old man's voice shook. "The patrol came through yesterday. We warned them not to go to the mines. We told them about the sounds, about the shepherds who've gone missing. But they laughed, said they weren't afraid of old stories." "What sounds?" Wali Ahmad looked at him for a long moment. "Come inside." Quickly. In the guest room, over cups of tea neither of them touched, the headman spoke in whispers. "For 3 months now, shepherds have been losing goats near the old mines. At first we thought wolves. But then Ismail followed his flock one night and saw them. Them? Men, but not men. Tall as trees, pale as death, wearing animal skins. They were taking the goats into the caves. Ismail ran and never went back. 3 other shepherds who didn't believe him went to look for themselves. Wali Ahmad's hands trembled. They never came back. Toki wanted to dismiss it as mountain nonsense, but the old man's terror was real, and Zadran's patrol was missing exactly where these things had been seen. Back at the vehicles, Toki found his men examining something in the dirt. Tracks, but wrong. Way too big, with a stride that would require someone enormous. "Bear?" suggested one of the soldiers. Pacho shook his head. "Bears don't walk on 2 legs for this distance. And look at the toe marks. Whatever made these was wearing some kind of soft shoes. They followed the tracks and Zadran's tire marks up the mountain. The road got worse, forcing them to drive slowly. Pine trees pressed in on both sides, creating shadows even in daylight. Every man had his weapon ready. The old copper mines appeared around a bend, crumbling stone buildings and dark cave entrances, but it was the vehicles that made them stop. 2 military trucks, doors open, engines cold, abandoned. "Defensive positions," Toki ordered, though his voice came out rougher than intended. "Check the vehicles." The trucks were empty except for personal gear, wallets, photos of families, half-eaten meals. But no weapons, no radios, and no blood. It was like the patrol had just vanished. "Sergeant!" Wahidullah's voice cracked with panic. He was standing at the entrance to the largest mine shaft, pointing at the wooden beams. Deep gouges scarred the wood, claw marks, but massive. Each gouge was as thick as a man's thumb and cut deep into solid timber. And the smell. God, the smell. Sweet and rotten and wrong, like meat left in the sun mixed with something chemical. From deep in the mine came a sound that made every man freeze. A low rumble that they felt in their chests, more than heard with their ears. Not mechanical, not quite animal. Something that triggered every primitive alarm in their brains. Back to the vehicles, Toki whispered, "Now." But even as they backed away, weapons raised, Toki knew they couldn't leave. 6 soldiers were missing. His duty was clear. They had to go into that mine. The rumbling came again, closer this time. And underneath it, so faint they almost missed it, a human voice, crying for help. Someone was alive in there. Toki looked at his men. He saw his own fear reflected in their eyes, but also determination. They were soldiers. They didn't abandon their brothers. "Samurai, take 2 men and guard the entrance. Anyone comes out that isn't us or Zadran's patrol." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. "The rest of you, with me, lights on, fingers on triggers. And if that thing charges us, don't hesitate. Empty your magazines." They formed up at the mine entrance. The darkness inside seemed solid, like a wall of black. Their flashlights barely penetrated more than a few meters. Toki took a deep breath, tasting that awful smell, and stepped into the cave. Behind them, the sun was shining on a normal day in Afghanistan. Ahead of them lay darkness that had swallowed 6 armed soldiers without a trace. And somewhere in that darkness, something was waiting. The darkness inside the mine swallowed them whole. Toki's flashlight beam looked pathetically small against the black void ahead. Every step echoed wrong, like the cave was much bigger than it should be. That sweet, rotten smell got stronger with each meter they advanced. Then they found the blood, not pools of it, just drops leading deeper into the tunnel, still wet enough to gleam in their lights. Someone had been dragged this way recently, maybe within hours. "Movement ahead," Pacha whispered. They all froze. In the distance, barely visible, something shifted in the shadows. Too big to be human, too deliberate to be an animal. The tunnel split into 3 passages. The blood trail led left, along with those massive footprints. But now Toki could hear something from that direction. Breathing. Deep, rhythmic breathing from lungs much larger than any man's. "Sergeant," Noor pointed his light at the ground. "Look at this." Military equipment scattered across the cave floor, rifles bent like toys, body armor torn apart like paper, a helmet with 5 deep punctures through the Kevlar, and Zadran's name tag covered in something dark and sticky. That's when they heard the scream. Human. Male. Somewhere deeper in the caves. Very much alive and absolutely terrified. Toki made a decision that would haunt him forever. "We go in, fast and hard. Whatever's in there, we hit it before it knows we're coming." They rushed down the left tunnel, boots splashing through puddles of something they didn't want to identify. The passage opened into a massive chamber, and what they saw there made them all stop dead. Bodies. 3 of them, sitting against the far wall like broken dolls. Afghan army uniforms twisted at impossible angles. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the thing crouched over them. It turned when their lights hit it, and for a second, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Nobody could even process what they were seeing. The giant was everything the stories said, and worse. 4 meters tall, even hunched over. Skin so pale it almost glowed in their lights. Hair like dried blood hanging past its shoulders. And its face, almost human. That was the terrifying part. It had features like a person, but stretched and distorted. Eyes too large, jaw too heavy. And when it opened its mouth, they saw rows of teeth like a shark's. But the hands were what made Toki's finger freeze on his trigger. 6 fingers on each hand, thick as a child's wrist, ending in black nails that looked more like claws. The giant made a sound. Not quite a roar, not quite speech. It vibrated through the chamber and made dust fall from the ceiling. Then it moved. Nothing that big should move that fast. It didn't charge them. It went sideways, deeper into the cave, dragging something with it. No, someone. They caught a glimpse of an Afghan army uniform, arms flailing weakly. "Open fire!" The cave exploded with gunfire. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness like lightning. Toki saw his bullets hit the giant, saw dark blood spray, heard it make that terrible sound again. But it didn't go down. It just moved faster, disappearing into another tunnel. "Cease fire! Check those bodies!" Pacha ran to the 3 soldiers against the wall. His face told Toki everything. Dead, hours ago, necks snapped like twigs. So who had screamed? Who was the giant dragging? That's when they heard them. Voices, multiple voices, calling for help from deeper in the cave system. The rest of Zadran's patrol was alive down there. "Sergeant, we need to leave." Wahidola's voice shook. "Call for backup. Get more men." Toki knew he was right. They were 6 men with rifles against something that shrugged off bullets. But those voices, those were his brothers down there. Afghan soldiers counting on rescue. "We push forward," he decided, "but stay close. If we get separated in here..." He didn't need to finish. They all understood. The giant knew these caves. They didn't. The tunnel system was a maze. Passages branched off in every direction, some natural, some carved by miners decades ago. Their compasses spun uselessly, and Toki had the disturbing feeling that the caves were somehow bigger on the inside than the mountain could contain. They followed the blood and the sounds. Every shadow could hide death. Every corner could be their last. The voices got louder, more desperate. Then they entered the second chamber and found out why the giant hadn't killed them immediately. It wasn't alone. The room was massive, stretching up into darkness their lights couldn't reach, and scattered throughout it were more giants. 6, maybe 7, all watching the soldiers with those 2 large eyes. Males, females, and something that might have been children, if children could be 2 meters tall with hands that could crush skulls. In the center, tied with what looked like twisted metal cables, were the 3 missing soldiers. Alive but terrified beyond the ability to speak. They just stared at their rescuers with eyes that had seen too much. The largest giant stepped forward. It had to duck to avoid the ceiling, putting it at well over 4 meters tall. When it spoke, the words came from deep in its chest, mangled but recognizable. It was speaking Pashto, badly accented, like it had learned by listening, but definitely their language. "You, leave, now, or join them." Toki felt his men tense behind him. 30 rounds per magazine, 7 targets, 3 hostages in the line of fire. The math was all wrong. "We're taking our men," Toki said. Surprised, his voice stayed steady. The giant tilted its massive head. Then it smiled, showing all those rows of teeth. "No, you, food. We, hungry, winter, long." Food. It had just called them food. One of the smaller giants moved toward the tied soldiers. The captives screamed, thrashing against their bonds. Toki had maybe 2 seconds to decide. Start a firefight they couldn't win, or try something else. He lowered his rifle. "Wait," he said loudly. "We can bring you other food. Animals, sheep, goats. Just let our men go." The giants looked at each other. They made sounds that might have been language, too low and complex for human ears to fully catch. The large one turned back to him. "You lie like others before." Others before. How many patrols had vanished in these mountains? How many were blamed on the Taliban when the truth was much worse? "I'm not lying," Toki insisted. "Let them go, and we'll bring food." The giant considered this. Then it did something that chilled Toki more than all the teeth and claws. It laughed. A sound like rocks grinding together. We keep 3, you bring food, or we come find you. Find them. These things knew where the base was. They'd been watching all along. Toki had no choice. Deal. What happened next was the longest 10 minutes of his life. 2 giants untied the prisoners while the others watched the soldiers with predator eyes. The freed men could barely walk, supported between Toki's squad. One kept whispering prayers. Another wouldn't stop staring at the giants with blank, broken eyes. They backed out slowly, weapons still ready, but pointed down. The giants let them go, but their message was clear. This wasn't over. Outside in the blessed sunlight, they ran. Behind them, from deep in the caves, came that harmonized rumbling. It sounded like laughter. They'd saved 3 men. But at what cost? They'd made a deal with monsters. And somewhere in those caves, things that shouldn't exist were waiting for their payment. The ride back to base was silent, except for one of the rescued soldiers, who kept repeating the same thing over and over. They're smart. They're so smart. They've been watching us, learning. They know things. He was right, and that was the most terrifying part of all. Back at base, everything went insane. The 3 rescued soldiers were rushed to the medical tent, babbling about monsters in caves and things that couldn't exist. The medics shot them full of sedatives, but even unconscious, they twitched and moaned like they were still trapped in nightmares. Toki was immediately dragged into the command center, where Captain Maiwan waited with 2 Americans, a Special Forces major named Briggs, and another guy who never gave his name but had intelligence officer written all over him. "Tell us everything," Major Briggs said. "Don't leave out a single detail." So Toki told them. The giants, the caves, the deal he'd made to save the soldiers. With every word, he expected them to call him crazy, to demand a drug test, to throw him in a cell. Instead, they just nodded like they'd heard it all before. "How many did you see?" the intelligence officer asked. 6, maybe 7, but the caves went deeper. There could be dozens, hundreds. Major Briggs and the intel officer exchanged a look that made Toki's blood run cold. "You knew," Toki said. "You already knew they were there." "Sergeant, what I'm about to tell you is classified beyond your clearance level," Briggs said. "But given what you've seen, you need to understand the situation." He pulled out a laptop and showed Toki photos that made his stomach turn. Giants caught on satellite imagery, cave entrances sealed with concrete in Pakistan, Tajikistan, even parts of Russia. Military reports dating back decades, all stamped classified in red. "We call them alpines," Briggs explained. "Anomalous large primate indigenous to northern elevations. They've been here longer than recorded history. Every major military force that's operated in these mountains has encountered them." "Then why aren't we hunting them down?" The intel officer actually laughed. "Hunt them? Sergeant, we've tried. In 1983, the Soviets sent an entire Spetsnaz battalion after a nest in Tajikistan. 12 men came back. In 2001, we lost a Delta Force team that went too deep. These things are smart. They know the caves better than we ever will, and they have abilities we don't fully understand." "Abilities?" Briggs pulled up a video file. Grainy footage from a helmet cam. Toki watched American soldiers firing at something off-screen. Then, their equipment started failing. Lights, radios, even their rifle sights went dead. The last frame showed massive shapes moving in the darkness before the camera cut out. "They can generate some kind of electromagnetic field," Briggs said. "Kills anything electronic within 50 meters. We think it's how they've stayed hidden so long. Any drone or satellite that gets too close just stops working." Toki felt sick. "So we just leave them there? Let them take our people?" "We contain them," the intel officer said. Keep people away from their territory. It's worked for years. Except now, they want us to bring them food, Toki pointed out. What happens when I don't deliver? The Americans went quiet. Finally, Briggs spoke. You're going to deliver. What? 3 goats, tomorrow night. You'll leave them at the cave entrance and withdraw. We'll have surveillance on the area. This is an opportunity to learn more about them. You want to feed them? Would you rather they come looking for food themselves? Toki thought about the giants saying they knew where to find them, about those massive shapes moving through darkness, about what would happen if even one of those things decided to visit the base at night. The next evening, Toki found himself back at the copper mines with 3 terrified goats in the truck. His squad was with him, along with a team of American specialists who set up cameras and sensors around the cave entrance. They tied the goats to a post and retreated to what everyone hoped was a safe distance. Then they waited. At exactly midnight, the temperature dropped 10 degrees in seconds. The goats started screaming, not normal bleating, but actual screams of terror. Every piece of electronic equipment died at the same moment. Night vision, radios, even their watches stopped working. In the darkness, they heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, getting closer. By moonlight alone, they saw it. A giant emerged from the cave, but this one was different from the ones in the chamber. Older, its pale skin covered in what looked like tattoos or scars and patterns that hurt to look at. It moved differently too, not like an animal, but with purpose and intelligence. It looked directly at where they were hidden, even though they were hundreds of meters away in total darkness. Then it spoke, and somehow its voice carried perfectly across the distance. We accept offering this time. It untied the goats with those 6-fingered hands, gentle as a shepherd. But instead of taking them into the cave, it did something that made everyone watching question their sanity. It pulled out a knife. Not a crude stone tool, but worked metal with symbols carved into the blade. It killed the goats quickly, expertly, then began arranging them in a pattern on the ground. The pattern meant nothing to Toki, but he heard one of the American specialists gasp. That's not possible. Those symbols are pre-Sumerian. They're over 6,000 years old. The giant finished its work and looked up at the hidden soldiers again. When it spoke this time, it wasn't in broken Pashto. It was in something older, something that bypassed the ears and appeared directly in their minds. You think you are the first. You are not. Your kind built cities on our bones, stole our words, forgot your makers. But we remember. We have always remembered. Then it picked up the arranged goats and vanished into the cave. Back at base, the specialists were in full panic mode. The symbols the giant had made were showing up in archaeological databases, cave paintings in France, pottery in China, stone carvings in Peru, all predating known civilization, all previously dismissed as meaningless primitive art. They're not primitives, one specialist kept saying. They're not animals. They're what we came from, or learned from, or ... He couldn't finish. None of them could. Because if the giants were telling the truth, everything they knew about human history was wrong. Over the next week, more evidence poured in. Soldiers from other bases reported similar encounters. Satellite imagery showed heat signatures moving through mountains all over Central Asia. And in the base library, Toki found something that made his hands shake. A book about Alexander the Great's campaigns. In it, a passage he'd never noticed before. In the high passes, Alexander's men encountered the gigantes, the old ones who dwelt in caves. They spoke the first language and knew the secret names of all things. Alexander made a pact with them, safe passage in exchange for tribute. Those who broke the pact were never seen again. 2,000 years ago. They've been making deals with these things for 2,000 years. "We need to tell people," Wahidullah said when Toki showed him the book. "The world needs to know." "No," Toki said firmly. "We keep quiet. We survive. And we pray they stay in their caves." But he knew that prayer was useless, because now he understood what the rescued soldiers meant. The giants were smart. They were learning. They were patient. And they were waiting for something. Late that night, new orders came through. Toki's entire squad was being transferred to Herat province, 600 kilometers away. The official reason was operational requirements. But Toki knew the truth. They'd seen too much. They were being scattered before they could talk. As their convoy prepared to leave, Toki saw helicopters heading toward the mountains. Black helicopters with no markings, carrying men with no unit patches and equipment he didn't recognize. Whatever was in those caves, someone very powerful was very interested in it. And they wanted soldiers like Toki as far away as possible. But distance didn't stop the dreams. Every night, Toki saw those caves, heard that ancient voice, felt the weight of a truth too big for the world to handle. The giants were real. They'd always been real. And they were getting tired of hiding. Master Sergeant Roy Jeffries had been in Delta Force for 12 years. He'd hunted terrorists in Iraq, rescued hostages in Somalia, and done things in places that didn't officially exist. But standing at the entrance to those caves at 2 a.m., watching his breath fog in the mountain air, he felt something he hadn't felt since his first firefight. Raw, primal fear. Thermals showing multiple heat signatures deep inside, Specialist Kowalski reported. But they keep flickering, like they're moving between dimensions or something. 8 Delta operators. 2 scientists from some agency Jeffries had never heard of. 1 linguist who thought she was here to decode Taliban communications. All armed with the latest gear. Next-gen night vision, electromagnetic shielding, weapons that cost more than most people's houses. It wasn't going to be enough. "Remember," Captain Morrison briefed them one last time, "we need a specimen. Alive if possible, dead if necessary. This is our chance to understand what we're dealing with." They entered in 2 teams. The main tunnel was wider than Toki had reported, like something had excavated it further. Their boots crunched on bone fragments, some old, some disturbingly fresh. 20 meters in, the first sensor died. Then another. Their equipment was supposedly hardened against electromagnetic interference, but whatever was in these caves was stronger than anything they'd planned for. "Movement ahead," someone whispered. Jeffrey saw it through his night vision, a shape that shouldn't exist. Too tall, too wrong, moving with a fluid grace that made his brain hurt to process. It disappeared around a corner before anyone could react. They pushed deeper. The cave system was impossibly complex, passages that doubled back on themselves, chambers that were bigger than the mountain should contain. Their compasses didn't just spin, they pointed to directions that didn't exist. Then they found the bone room, an entire chamber, walls lined with skeletal remains. Thousands of them. Some were clearly human, soldiers from every era, still wearing fragments of uniform. Soviet, British, older ones that might have been Mongol or Persian. But others weren't human at all. Wrong proportions, too many ribs, skulls with eye sockets in places eyes shouldn't be. "My God," Dr. Webb whispered. "They're collecting them, studying them." That's when they heard the sound. Not the rumbling Toki described, but something worse. Music. Impossible harmonics that made their teeth ache and their vision blur. It was coming from everywhere and nowhere. "Defensive positions," Morrison barked. Too late. The lights went out. Not just their lights. Everything. Night vision, thermals, even the luminous dials on their watches. They were plunged into absolute darkness. Then the screaming started. Jeffries heard Kowalski's voice cut off mid-shout, the sound of something wet hitting stone. Muzzle flashes lit up the chamber in strobe-like glimpses of hell. They weren't fighting one or two giants. There were dozens of them, pouring from passages that hadn't existed seconds before. And they weren't all the same. Some were the pale, 4-meter humanoids Toki had described. Others were wrong. Too many arms, faces that shifted and changed, bodies that moved in ways that violated physics. Jeffries emptied his magazine into something with too many teeth. Black blood sprayed, but it kept coming. He heard Morrison screaming orders that made no sense. Heard the linguist speaking in tongues, words in a language that predated human speech. Something grabbed him, lifted him like a child. In the muzzle flash from another soldier's rifle, he saw its face inches from his own. Almost human features stretched over a skull too large, but the eyes held intelligence. Ancient, terrible intelligence. It spoke, not with its mouth, but directly into his mind. You come seeking knowledge. We will show you truth. The world exploded into visions. Jeffrey saw the earth before humans, when these things walked openly under different stars. Saw them teaching the first humans language, tools, civilization. Saw them retreating underground as their students multiplied and forgot their teachers. Saw them waiting, patient as stone, for the stars to align again. He saw other things too, things that broke his mind to comprehend. Spaces between spaces where more of them waited. Not dozens, not hundreds, millions, waiting in the deep places of the earth for some signal he couldn't understand. The vision ended. Jeffries was on the ground, blood running from his nose and ears. Around him, the firefight continued. He saw Dr. Webb get pulled into a wall that had become liquid. Saw 2 operators firing at shadows that ate their bullets. Fall back, Morrison's voice, barely human anymore. White phosphorus. Burn it all. Jeffries pulled the pin on an incendiary grenade with shaking hands. The cave filled with chemical fire and smoke. In that hellish light, he saw the true scope of their situation. The giants weren't trying to kill them all. They were selecting, taking some, leaving others, learning. One of them, taller than the rest with skin covered in those ancient symbols, pointed at the survivors. When it spoke, everyone heard it in their minds. 5 of you will leave. 5 will stay. You will tell your masters what you have seen. Tell them the deep places are waking. The stars move toward their old positions. When they align, we reclaim what was ours. Choose who stays. Morrison made the choice. Pointed at 5 men seemingly at random. Or maybe not random. Jeffries realized later they'd all been the ones who'd seen the visions, whose minds had been touched. They ran. Behind them, the screams of the ones left behind echoed through the tunnels. But worse than the screams was when they stopped. Outside, they stumbled to the helicopters. The pilots were panicking. All their instruments had failed, engines barely running. They took off using manual controls, flying by starlight. In the helicopter, Jeffries looked at the other survivors. Morrison's hair had gone white. The linguist, Dr. Kane, was drawing symbols on her arms with her own blood, whispering in that ancient language. One operator just stared at nothing, tears streaming down his face. 5 had made it out. 6 had been left behind. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that Jeffries could still feel them in his mind, a connection formed by that terrible vision. He knew they were still alive down there, knew they were being changed, taught, prepared for something. And he knew that all over the world, in mountains and deep places humans had learned to avoid, others like them were waking up, the barriers weakening, the old agreements breaking down. 3 days later, Jeffries was processed out of Delta Force. Combat stress, they called it. The others got similar treatment. Dr. Kane was institutionalized. Morrison disappeared entirely. Rumor said he'd gone back to the caves on his own, drawn by something he couldn't resist. The official report stated that Operation Highland Shepherd had successfully eliminated an insurgent stronghold. All objectives achieved, minimal casualties. But Jeffries knew the truth. They'd knocked on a door that should have stayed closed, and something had answered. Something that had been waiting for a very long time. In his retirement, living alone in a cabin in Montana, Jeffries still dreams of those caves, still hears that ancient music, still feels them watching through eyes that exist in spaces between spaces. Sometimes he finds things that shouldn't be there. 6-fingered handprints on his windows. Symbols drawn in the dirt that match the ones Dr. Kane had drawn. Messages in that pre-human language that part of his mind can almost understand. They're coming. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. When the stars are right. When humanity has grown soft and forgotten the old fears. The giants never left. They just went deeper. And now they're climbing back up. Colonel James Harrington stared at the files on his desk and poured his third bourbon before noon. He'd overseen cover-ups before. Crashed experimental aircraft, friendly fire incidents, black ops gone wrong. But this was different. The satellite photos showed heat blooms under the Spingar Mountains that went down for miles. Geometric patterns that pulsed like a heartbeat. Movement in places where nothing should be able to live. How many people know? He asked the CIA woman who called herself Smith. Too many. 43 direct witnesses still breathing. The Afghan soldiers are being scattered across the country. The Americans are in psychiatric facilities or medical discharge. But it's spreading. She showed him intercepted emails, forum posts, encrypted messages between veterans. Soldiers were talking, comparing notes, realizing they weren't crazy. Then there's this. She slid him a photo that made his blood freeze. Peshawar, Pakistan. A street camera had caught something impossible. A 7-foot-tall figure in a hooded cloak buying goats at a night market. 6 fingers visible on one massive hand. It had paid in ancient gold coins that predated any known civilization. They're coming out, Harrington said. After all these years of hiding, they're coming out. It gets worse. Smith pulled up a map covered in red dots. These are all confirmed sightings in the last 6 months. Afghanistan, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Western China. Either they're getting bolder, or there's more of them. The cover-up machine went into overdrive. The Spin-Gar copper mines were declared a chemical weapons site from the Soviet era. 3 villages were evacuated, their residents paid off or threatened into silence. Concrete was poured into every cave entrance they could find. But you can't seal a mountain, and you can't hide the truth forever. October 2008. Kabul, Afghanistan. Journalist David Park had spent 2 years chasing the story. His brother had been in the 101st Airborne, part of a patrol that vanished in Paktia province. The official report said insurgent ambush, but Park knew better. He'd found Sergeant Toki in a tea house, convinced him to talk. What he heard confirmed everything. "You want to know what happened to your brother?" Toki said. "He went somewhere humans aren't meant to go. Saw something we're not meant to see. And whether he's dead or something else, there's nothing you can do about it." Park didn't listen. He published everything on his blog. Testimonies from 12 different soldiers, analysis of classified photos that had been leaked, connections to ancient texts about giants. The post went viral. For 36 hours, the world started to wake up to the truth. Then, Park disappeared. His apartment emptied. His family told he'd died in a car accident. The blog vanished like it had never existed. But screenshots survived, spreading through the dark corners of the internet where people whispered about things the government didn't want you to know. December 2012. Exclusion Zone, Spin-Gar Mountains. Lieutenant Colonel Rashid Dostum watched his engineers work on the barriers. 3 years they'd been pouring concrete, and still the giants found ways through. Cracks that appeared overnight. passages that hadn't been there before, and the missing shepherds. 17 this month alone. "Sir," his aide reported, "we found something." They'd broken through into a lower chamber while expanding the barriers. What they found there changed everything. A city, an underground city carved from living rock, older than human civilization. Empty now, but the architecture was clearly made for beings much larger than humans. And on the walls, pictures, carvings, showing the giants teaching humans, agriculture, language, mathematics, astronomy. Everything that had sparked human civilization had come from them. "Seal it," Dostum ordered. "Seal it and forget we ever saw it." But he couldn't forget. None of them could. Because if the giants had taught humanity everything, what else had they kept for themselves? What knowledge did they still possess? The Americans arrived within hours. Not military, something else. They had equipment Dostum didn't recognize, spoke in languages that sounded wrong. They went into the city and came out pale and shaking. That night, the entire mountain shook. Not an earthquake, something else. Something angry. By morning, every person who'd entered the underground city was gone. Vanished from locked rooms, from moving vehicles, from the middle of crowded barracks. The only trace was 6-fingered handprints burned into walls and windows. The message was clear. Some places weren't meant to be found. September 2018. Georgetown University professor Amanda Chen had inherited Dr. Elizabeth Kane's office and research. Hidden in old books, she found notes that changed everything she thought she knew about human language. The giants' language wasn't just old, it was the source. Every human language showed traces of it, like fragments of a broken master key. But more disturbing were Kane's recordings of the sounds they made. Frequencies that human vocal cords shouldn't be able to produce. Yet somehow Kane had managed. Chen spent months analyzing the patterns. What she found suggested that human language itself was a gift or a curse from these beings. That every word we spoke contained fragments of their power. She tried to publish her findings. Her office was ransacked, her computers wiped. The university put her on leave for mental health concerns. But she'd made copies, shared them with others who'd noticed the patterns. Veterans who'd heard the giants speak, archaeologists who'd found those symbols in ancient sites. They called themselves the Alpine Group after the military classification. They met in secret, compared notes, tried to prepare for what they all knew was coming. Present-day Bibi Gul still waits for her son to come home. 20 years now since specialist Hakimullah Zadran disappeared in the mountains. She's not alone. There's a whole network of families with missing soldiers. They meet quietly, share their pain, compare the lies they've been told. Some report strange dreams where their children call from underground, begging for help in languages they don't understand. Others find 6-fingered handprints on their windows during dust storms. A few claim to have seen their sons at distance, changed, taller, moving wrong, but alive. The exclusion zones keep expanding. Not just in Afghanistan, similar, contaminated areas have appeared in mountain ranges worldwide. The governments say chemical spills, radiation, unexploded ordnance. But locals know better. They see the lights at night, hear the harmonics that make animals flee, find livestock arranged in those ancient patterns, and sometimes, in markets from Peshawar to Dushanbe, tall figures in heavy cloaks buy supplies with old coins. They speak in accents no one can place, their words feeling older than the languages they're using. They're always polite, always pay well. But their hands, when the wind moves their sleeves, their hands have too many fingers. The war in Afghanistan officially ended. Troops withdrew. Victory was claimed by some, defeat admitted by others. But the real war never made the newspapers. The war between what humanity thinks it knows and what actually lurks in the deep places of the earth. In classified bunkers, analysts track the patterns. Seismic activity that doesn't match any geological model. heat signatures moving through solid rock, radio signals in frequencies that predate human technology. All of it pointing to the same conclusion. They're not hiding anymore. They're preparing. The stars are moving into positions not seen for millennia. Ancient astronomical alignments that match the carvings in that underground city. When they fully align, and the calculations say it will be soon, something will happen. The giants know what. They've always known. They've been waiting for it since before humans learned to write. And deep in mountains across the world, in caves that go deeper than any map shows, they're teaching the soldiers they took, changing them, preparing them for what's coming. Because when the stars are right, when the barriers finally fall, humanity will learn that we were never the dominant species on this planet. We were just borrowing it, and the real owners are getting ready to take it back. So now you know the truth. The truth they don't want you to know. The truth that keeps generals awake at night and makes tough soldiers jump at shadows. Giants are real. They're out there right now, in mountains all over the world, waiting in the darkness. And the really scary part? They're not the monsters in this story. We are. Think about it. They were here first. Way before humans ever existed. They built cities, created languages, maybe even had their own civilization when our ancestors were still figuring out fire. Then we came along, primitive, violent, multiplying like crazy, and they retreated underground. They could have wiped us out. Beings that can crush steel with their bare hands, shut down our technology with a thought, and move through solid rock. They could have destroyed humanity before we ever built our first city. But they didn't. They went deep. They hid. They let us have the surface world. The soldiers who've seen them, Afghan, American, British, Russian, they all say the same thing. These aren't mindless monsters. They're intelligent. They can learn our languages in days. They understand technology even if they don't use it. They make art, have families, remember everything, and they're patient. So incredibly patient. Every culture has giant stories. Greek Titans, Norse Jötnar, Biblical Nephilim, Native American stone giants. We always thought these were just myths, fairy tales to explain thunder or earthquakes. But what if they're memories? What if every culture remembers them because every culture encountered them? Here's what keeps me up at night. The giants told those Delta Force operators that the stars are moving back to old positions. That when they align, something's going to happen. Something they've been waiting thousands of years for. Are they going to take back the surface? Are there millions more sleeping in deeper places, waiting for some cosmic alarm clock? Or is it something else? Something we can't even imagine? The governments know. That's why there are more exclusion zones every year. Why satellite photos of certain mountains are classified. Why soldiers who see too much get transferred, discharged, or disappear. But they can't hide it forever. Too many people know now. Too many soldiers have stories. Too many families want answers about missing sons and brothers. The truth has a way of getting out, even when powerful people try to bury it. Maybe that's why you're reading this. Maybe it's time people knew. Not to cause panic, but to prepare. Because if the giants are right, if something big is coming, shouldn't we know about it? I've talked to over 40 veterans while researching this. Men and women who looked into those caves and saw something that changed them forever. Some try to forget. Others can't stop searching for answers. All of them know that the world is stranger and more dangerous than most people believe. To those soldiers, the ones who made it out and the ones who didn't, your courage means something. You faced the impossible and tried to protect the rest of us from a truth we might not be ready for. That takes a different kind of bravery than fighting human enemies. To everyone else, remember this. Every mountain has its secrets. Every deep cave might lead somewhere it shouldn't. Those exclusion zones exist for a reason. The old stories your grandparents told might not be stories at all. And if you're ever hiking and find a cave that smells wrong, That has marks too big to be made by any animal. That makes sounds that vibrate in your chest instead of your ears. Turn around. Walk away. Some doors should stay closed. The giants are still out there. They're waiting for something we don't understand. They remember things we've forgotten. And one day, maybe soon, they're going to remind us that we're not alone on this planet. We never were.